In this section, we're going to be graphing square root functions. The parent function for a square root function is just the square root of x. And if we plug some numbers into here, we would want to pick numbers that are easy to square root. So we would start with 0. Square root of 0 is 0. Okay, next one would be 1. Square root of 1 is 1. That would give us the 0.11. Right, square root of 4 is 2. So now we're plugging in x is 4, and we're getting y equals 2. Okay, if we were to plug in 9 for the x, we would get 3 for the y. Okay, so our graph is going to look like this. Now, domain and range we can get from looking at the graph. Domain is the set of all inputs, it's the x's, and we can see the x's are starting at the y-axis here, and it's going to the right. So the x is everything at or above 0. Right? The y value is starting at the x-axis at 0, and it's going up. Okay, so the range is y is greater than or equal to 0. That's the parent function. Okay, we can change this graph. This is the more complicated graph. It can be scaled by a number out front, by that a, and it can be shifted with values in that h and k. All right, so the center or the starting point is the opposite of this h, and the same for that k as it was for pretty much every graphing type that we've done this year. So let's say we want to graph the function -3 times square root of x. We always want to start with the parent function, with the points at 0, 0, 1, 1, 4, 2, 9, 3. And the first thing we want to look at is there a scale factor? Okay, and in this case, there's a scale factor of -3, which means all of these points are going to end up -3 times as high. Okay, and this one too, really, although it's not going to change. So if we take the y values, okay, because the x isn't changing, it's only the y that's changing, and we multiply it by -3. So for example, the y value on this first point, and we're going to multiply it times -3, and it's going to stay at 0. Now the next point in the list is 1, 1. We're going to take the 1 from that y value, and we're going to multiply it by -3. Now it's down here. Okay, this next point is at 4, 2. Okay, only the y is what we care about, and that 2 is going to get multiplied by -3, and it's going to become a -6. So now we're at 4, -6. And this last one is at 9, 3. Okay, this 3 gets multiplied by -3, and now we're at 9, -9. This is our new graph. Okay, the domain is still starting at x and moving to the right, starting at 0 and moving to the right. The range is still starting at 0, but instead of going above that x-axis, it's now going below it. So the range is y is less than or equal to 0. In this one, we have a scale factor and a shift. So we start with our parent function, and we always deal with this scale factor first. Okay, so all these points are going to get twice as high as they are in our first graph. So 0 times 2 is still 0. 1 times 2, it's twice as high. 2 times 2 is now at 4, and 3 times 2 is at 6. So this blue graph has been scaled by this 2 here. We haven't dealt with this yet. All right, now that -1 inside that square root, we're going to move the opposite of what it says. And since it's next to the x, it's moving it left or right. Negative makes us think it's going to go to the left, but it's actually going to go to the right one. Okay, this does the same as what it says. That's moving it up and down. Same means this is going to move down 2. So all of these points are going to move right 1, down 2. So if we take this blue first point here, we move right 1, down 2, we're down there. This, move right 1, down 2, we're down there. Start putting these points on the graph. This one, move right 1, down 2. Right 1, down 2. Okay, and this is our new graph. Domain here would be starting at 1. X starts at 1, it goes to the right, so x is greater than or equal to 1. The range, if we look at the graph, we can see it's starting at -2. It's going up, so y is greater than or equal to -2. Now this one has a fraction and it's an inequality. So we're going to start with our parent function, and let's scale it by this 3 over 2. Okay, so all these points get multiplied by 1.5. 1 times 1.5 is 1.5. 2 times 1.5 is 3. 3 times 1.5, 4.5. Okay, so that's our new blue graph here. Now we want to shift it based on this number right here. Okay, that's moving it the opposite of what we see, and it's moving it on the x-axis, which means it's going to move it left 4. So all of these blue points move left 4. Okay, I'm moving them one at a time, and then once they're all moved over, I'm going to draw on my line here. Now, one thing that's different for this one is that this is an inequality, which means we have to shade the graph. So when we shade it, okay, we're just going to look at this sign, and we're going to shade either above or below it. Greater than means we shade above it. Less than means we shade below it. But one thing to keep in mind is that the domain of this graph doesn't start until our graph starts. So there shouldn't be any shading to the left of that black dotted line. Now we want to shade above our graph and to the right of this dotted line. So it would look like that. Okay, our starting point, which is this point right here, we get from opposite of this and then that plus 0 at the end. Okay, domain, it starts at -4, which is this line right here. It's going to the right, so x is greater than or equal to -4. Range, it's starting at 0. It's moving above it as it moves up. Okay, so y is greater than or equal to 0. One last one, parent function. Scale it by 2, so it becomes twice as large. After that, we want to move left 3. Okay, this is opposite, and it's on the horizontal axis. Down 3. This is the same, and it's on the vertical axis. So each of these, I'm sorry, left 3, down 3. Okay, left 3, down 3. And et cetera, et cetera. All right, put all our graphs on, our points on the graph. We have to shade it again because it's an inequality, and this time we have a dotted line because this sign doesn't have that or equal to sign there. I also have a dotted, an empty circle there. All of these circles really should be empty, but that one in particular you'll see is empty when they're graphed on standardized tests. We're graphing underneath our line. We're shading underneath our line because it's a less than sign. And we don't want to shade anything to the left of our dotted line because the domain begins where the graph begins. Okay, so the domain starts at -3 and it moves to the right. This starting point, -3, -3, comes from the opposite of this. Same for that one, and that is that point right there.